Hello and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren. Everything's fallen over from Lauren and the Books. And yes, I have a shirt on that's got cat faces on. If there was ever a shirt that was made for me, it's like this. It's like someone's gone and made it for me. Although they haven't really made it for me because I have breasts. And apparently shirts don't fit people who have breasts. So that's gaping there. So just ignore this little gaping hole bit and just concentrate on the lovely catness of it all. Catness, like Katniss Everdeen. Today I'm going to be talking about podcasts and bookish podcasts. So I've been blathering on about it forever, but myself and Mercedes from Mercy's Bookish Musings have started a podcast together. I will link the link to it down below. At the moment it is just on YouTube. It's on Mercedes' channel, so I will link the link to it down below. We've had like almost 3,000 listens on it, which is amazing. Such good feedback on it, and it is called Books and Blankets. It's a monthly bookish podcast which will be coming out on the 1st of every month, and we will be chatting about books and coziness. This month we had it was quite a long podcast. We're not expecting it to be as long as it is every month, but it was sort of like an introduction, books we've got in common, authors we both like. We're talking about our reading histories, what we've liked in the past and what we like now. Next month on the 1st of December it will be a Christmas episode, so if you haven't already got in touch with us via our Twitter, which is @booksandblankets, on our email, which is booksandblanketspodcast@gmail.com, or on our Instagram, which is @booksandblanketspodcast, or merely on the video or on this video, if you've got any ideas for anything you'd like us to chat about, which is Christmas related, then we will be recording that Christmas episode soon. I'm going to take a mouthful of this because I'm just teasing myself with it being here. Lovely, lovely, nice cup of tea. So I wanted to just highlight the fact that that is out there now, and if you haven't listened to it, then you should go and have a little listen. But I also wanted to have a little chat about some of the other bookish podcasts that I'm interested in. So I've got here 5 bookish podcasts that I listen to like as soon as they come out, and I just cannot not listen to them. Now, some of them, if you're into your bookish podcasts, and these are going to be really obvious to you, and you're going to be like, Book Riot, we all know about that, Lauren. But I didn't know about Book Riot's podcast. So when I found Bookish Podcasts, I was like, oh, bloody hell, this is an amazing one. So I'm just mentioning my top 5 that I listen to literally as soon as they come out. If you've got any Bookish podcast recommendations that you would like to give to me, then please write them below. But I will start with The Readers, which is a bookish podcast. I'm going to be saying bookish podcast loads. Bookish podcast. Like that time I did the video about 5-star books and I kept saying 5-star books, 5-star books. So by the end, bookish podcasts is going to be a phrase of words that isn't even going to make sense. I think I've lost it. I think I've actually gone mad. It's this cold weather. The first bookish podcast I'm going to be talking about is by our very own Simon Savage over at Savage Reads. Simon's channel and Simon himself, I adore. I love him, and I think maybe in another lifetime we might have been wed to one another, Simon. Do you think we would have been wed to one another? He hosts a bookish podcast called The Readers, which I absolutely love. I love Simon's opinions on book. He has got such a vast knowledge about books, and he does it with a little chap, a friend whose name has escaped me, and that is awful. I should have written it down. Is it in my brain? No. He does it with a pal, and it's just really nice to listen into their chats. Now, one of their favourite shows they did was that they did recently was books that are coming out shortly, and it was just literally like a shopping list for me, like, oh, I want that one, oh, I want that one, oh, I want that one. And he's just got such a great, he's just so engaging, Simon, and I would listen to him talk about anything. So having a bookish podcast that I can listen to on the way to and from work is wonderful. So The Readers, which is available on iTunes, you should definitely go and check that out. I listen to my podcast, should have said this at the opener of this video, I listen to my podcasts on the way to and from work. I have a 40-minute drive to and from work, and I tend to listen to one on the way there, one on the way back, and sometimes during the day if I'm doing a task at work that I can do it. Apart from that, they mainly listen to like on the way to and from work. Occasionally I'll listen to one as I'm trying to get to sleep if David's not also trying to get to sleep and he's like, what is that? Turn it off. So those are the way that I listen to them. The second podcast that I want to mention, now this is when we're getting into the Book Riot podcast. So Book Riot is a company, I guess, set up in America, which run a number of bookish podcasts and book events and things like that. The first one, the main Book Riot podcast, is It's not my least favourite of the three. No, it's not. It's my second favourite of the three that I listen to that Book Riot have done. So it's a weekly podcast about bookish news and things like that. So most recently they've been talking about the Goodreads Award, and also they were talking about books that have girl in the title and things like that. And it's just a really nice just way to get some bookish news in if you haven't got time to go searching on the internet and things like that, or don't have time to read bookish articles. Then that's a really good way to get news into it. And the two guys that oh my god, I've forgotten their names as well. The two guys that run it, I absolutely love listening to them, and and that brings me on to the third bookish podcast I'm going to be talking about, which is probably my favourite of the bookish podcast, which is called All the Books. This is, again, it's a weekly podcast run by two gals, where they talk about the books that are coming out that week. And this is, again, as I said before with Simon's podcast, which is just like a shopping list for me. This I'm like driving in, listening to it, thinking, oh, got to add that, got to add that, got to add that, and I actually have to go back and look at the show notes to pick out the books, because they mention so many amazing books, and it's a real thrill when you're listening to that and they're talking about an amazing book that's coming out and you're like, I've got that, yes! So that's very exciting. And then third, the fourth podcast I'm going to mention, which is the third Book Riot podcast, is Get Booked. So this is a podcast where people write in asking for book recommendations, which is something I really, really enjoy listening to, because even if it's someone asking for a book recommendation for something, a situation, or for someone who doesn't like anything like me, I always like to know what people are recommending. So I really enjoy listening to that one as well. And then the last podcast that I listen to is, of course, Witch Please, which is a podcast all based around Harry Potter. It sort of dried up a bit. It was a fortnightly podcast, and it sort of dried up a bit until The Cursed Child came out. Then they did a couple of podcasts on that, and now I've just listened to one which is about the trailers for Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. And they're always just finding new material to talk about, and it really goes in depth into the Harry Potter world. So sometimes it's a little bit too in depth for me, but it's really nice to revisit Harry Potter with people who just know everything about it, and just to chat and just to listen away to that. So those are my top 5 bookish podcasts. What bookish podcasts do you guys listen to? Have you got any recommendations for me? Did you enjoy our first episode of Books and Blankets? I'm listing here the things that I want you to write in the comment section below. Have you got any bookish podcast recommendations for me? Did you enjoy Books and Blankets, the first episode? Have you got anything you would like us to talk about in the Christmas episode? Do you like this shirt? Who can not like this shirt? I'm going to have a bit of tea. And that's it for me, and I will see you again on Sunday for another BookTube video. Goodbye!